All right, guys, welcome to my class today. So today I'm going to be teaching on farming and the high level of farming. Now, I want to make sure that we clarify what today is about. When I look at the best thing that I could be for the consumer out there in the real estate world is an economic expert. And so when we look at farming, and let's just define what farming is. Farming is pinpointing an area that I want to go in and take market share. And so I am very serious and very purposeful about laying out a strategy to cultivate that area and to gain, obviously, access to that consumer, to gain market share from that area, and to close transactions where I am one of the key real estate agents in that particular area. Now, if we look at what it looks like to gain market share, most people measure that um, by the retail kind of version of that story. Sorry, got lost for words there. The retail side, which is usually 15%. Once you have 15% of the market, that really is a key indicator of market share. So today, when we look at farming, I want to break down how I look at, do I want to farm this area? So this isn't necessarily going to be a how do I farm this area. It's going to be, do I want to farm this area? We've got to be smart about the way we attract clients, and especially in the means of farming, because sometimes the numbers just don't make sense. We may live inside of a neighborhood that we think, yeah, man, I'm going to farm this. I'm going to take over this neighborhood. It's going to be amazing. And yet when we look at the numbers, our own neighborhoods where we are the most familiar, where we could really be neighborhood experts, might not actually make sense for us to be farming that space. And so I want to look at this and I want to explain how I come up with what is the best case scenario for me to farm for the outcome of market share. Okay. So the very first thing that I'm looking at, and remember, we're going to talk about this in the mindset of being an economic leader, right? The economy of sales in a particular neighborhood. So the very first thing that I look at, it's a no-brainer, active listings. So I want to look at the active listings, and I'm going to look at it in three spaces, right? So the very first thing that I want to consider in the active listing side of things is obviously current. What are the current numbers? So if I go into my MLS and I run a report for a particular neighborhood, I can see this neighborhood has 14 active listings, let's say. Okay, so then I'm looking at that. Second thing I want to look at is days on market, okay? Days on market. I want to see what is the current scenario for the days on market with the active listings. And it's, most people only look at the sold data for days on market. The reason why I want to look at the active listings days on market is that I need to understand what's really happening within the market right now. What's happening in the market now? So sales data is past, active data is now. So what's happening now? And there's a reason why. Usually we look at the average days on market. The average is going to take, obviously, all of the numbers, add them up, and divide it by how many numbers there were. So if there's 14 homes, there's 14 different days on market. We add up all those days on market. We divide it by 14, and that's our average. Well, what I want to look at is, are there any anomalies that the story is being told on with the active listings? And so if I'm looking at days on market, there's a chance that I'm going to go in and there's, I don't know, let's say 10 homes that sold in like 2 to 20 days, right? So 10 homes sold in 2 to 20 days, and 4 of them was like 300 plus days. And so there's something that's happening there. There's some sort of story that's a sweet spot. I need to look at that days on market for the homes, so the homes that had the high days on market. What was happening with those particular homes? Is there something that I need to avoid, or something that I need to pay attention to, so that then when I build my farming plan, my action plan, there's a chunk of homes that I want to avoid, or a particular type of consumer that I want to avoid for my return on investment. Okay, so that's why I want to look at the active days on market. Now there's other reasons, but that's the reason why I want to look at it. And so I was looking at my particular neighborhood, so I'm going to use some of the data from my neighborhood. So when I look at it, half of the homes, so 7 of them were going to be 5 to 26 days on market, and then the other half was going to be 60 plus days on market. Okay, so there's something really distinct about this. I can have a lot of early, quick success with this profile of a home, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So I'm going to draw a little star on there because there is going to be a necessary ramp up period whenever we're doing any kind of farming or introducing ourselves into a farming space. Okay, so days on market, it just tells me the story of what's happening right now, because I have to go out and get business today as much as I am future planning for this particular neighborhood. Okay, so days on market. And then the last thing that I'm always curious about, not as easy to find, and yet you can go search for it, is I want to know the total number of homes in the neighborhood. This doesn't necessarily give me any advantage by knowing this, but it gives me the ability to understand a little bit more about what the capacity is for me to gain market share, how much market share really needs to be. It gives me the opportunity to understand where my margin of error is for gaining market share. And so it just helps me to put all of the numbers on a map to be able to know what do I need to do, what activities need to produce the results that I'm aiming for, okay? Because all of it is going to be constructed, a strategy is going to be constructed from understanding where the data sits, okay? Second thing that I'm going to look at is sold data. Now, sold data is a very duh statement. We're always going to be looking at sold data. I break sold data up into 2 different categories because I'm looking at sold data in 2 different worlds for what I want to do in the farming aspect. So the second thing I'm looking at, again, sold data. When I think about sold data, the first space I want to look at is at 0 to 30 days, okay? Second space is the 0 to 180. The 0 to 30 days, why I'm paying attention to what's happening in the last month is I want to understand where the absorption rate is. And here's what's important about the absorption rate. The absorption rate is showing us, are we in a seller's market or are we in a buyer's market? Second thing it's showing us is the current inventory, the months of inventory. And so if I'm looking at the 0 to 30, so what's happened in the past month, the way I come to an absorption rate, and here's why absorption rate is important, okay? Let's not miss this point. So many of our clients and so many of the consumers, they come from a space to where they're having a conversation about what the market feels like. We get the opportunity to tell them what the market is. So it's the data point that says it's a seller's market or it's a buyer's market. It's not just the opinion of the consumer or the opinion of the consumer's friends. I have a lot of people that I come into contact with because I'm in real estate and because I have a wide network. I always get real estate questions about what the market looks like. And almost always somebody goes, well, Johnny told me that now is the perfect time to sell. Johnny, who is not a realtor, by the way. Johnny's just some neighbor. Johnny told me it's a great time to sell, man, because of A, B, and C. I'm like, well, that's really interesting. And it is a great time to sell, but it's not because of A, B, and C. It's because we're in a seller's market. And this is all the reasons why we're in a seller's market. And if you look at the data, here's A, B, and C. The quickest jumping off point into that data to begin to get people to think differently, right? Data makes us think, emotions make us act. And so to get them to start thinking differently is to help them to understand that the absorption rate is truly the data of now in the past 30 days of what this neighborhood has been doing. So Johnny's opinion doesn't matter as much as what the neighborhood's telling us is possible, okay? What the market is telling us is possible. Absorption rate, I'm going to take that. So in the past 0 to 30 days, I want to know how many homes have sold. In my neighborhood, in the past 30 days, it's been 5. So in the past 30 days, how many have been sold? And there's 14 active listings. That's 0.357 turned into a percentage. It's about 36%. Sellers markets is 20% or higher. Buyers markets is 15% or lower. Even in a great market, it's going to be really difficult to get anything over 50%. And so our ceiling is usually in that 50% range. And so sellers market's happening in that 20% range. Buyers market's happening in the 15% or low. There's some more conversations about economically why that is. That will be for another day. If you have a curiosity, you want to ask that question, drop it in the comment below here, and I'd be happy to reach out to you and have a further conversation about that. But the reality is that when we look at this information, this is telling us the story of what's happening as far as a seller's market or a buyer's market in the area that we want to farm. Okay. The second thing, if you reverse this and you put 14 over 5, that's going to equal around 2.8, if I did my math correctly when I was looking at my notes. This is essentially telling us our inventory. So we've got 2.8 months of inventory. So the way that inventory sells, I've got 2.8 months before this neighborhood, this farm, has nothing left. And so that's really important as well. Obviously, most of us understand the data point of months of inventory as far as buyer's market or seller's market, and yet kind of a standard, and even the way that a lot of your appraisers will use more of along the percentage as far as the absorption rate. The absorption rate is kind of a standard for that. So just understand what that means, and it helps you to look a little bit smarter if you're having a conversation where you're in a scenario where there's multiple agents hunting for a job. You might get it because you're having the right conversations to be able to dig into that. So second thing I'm looking at is the 180. The 180, which is the past 6 months of data. This is my comp information, right? This is me currently looking at, if I were to farm this area, what has been happening with the comp information, what the market's saying right now, what's going on with current inventory, what's happened in the most recent past, what's really going to be looking, what's the market going to give us? Right now, what is the market going to give us? And why that is important is, if I do take over this area as a farm, am I going to have to fight the market for all of the people in this neighborhood if I'm taking over, if I'm starting a new farm? Or is it going to be able to be is the market going to give me some opportunity? So obviously, if you look at, most markets have some sort of bell curve or an inverse of a bell curve. And so there's a showing months that are like real slow, and then there's showing months that are really high. And then it usually kind of tapers off. So there's a bell curve to everything that we do in real estate. If you really back the data up far enough, you're going to see the bell curve. The comps gives us an idea of when that bell curve is going to work in our advantage and when it's going to work in our disadvantage. And so that's just helping me to understand, do I want to take over a neighborhood that has a very volatile market that I'm almost always going to be fighting against the market to be able to gain the market share? Okay. That's why I'm looking at this information. Now, usually this is going to be more holistic, like the whole market is going to follow it. And yet it's worth running this data to understand a neighborhood, because there could be some anomalies. Now, I'll give you a great, for instance, if you looked at, I grew up in Georgia, and so in South Atlanta in Clayton County, there was a time when the Clayton County schools lost their accreditation. And so the market bottomed out almost overnight for Clayton County. So if you looked at that little metro area as a whole, it would look as if the comps are great, the market's great, it's doing great, 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 great. And this one little anomaly, it's just dropped out. The bottom has fallen out. So you can't necessarily just take the expectations of the holistic side of the area. You've got to be able to look into those anomalies and make sure that you're not looking to farm an anomaly. There could be something that's drastically changing in the past 6 months that now you're going to be trying to farm a neighborhood or an area where you're going to be working an uphill battle against the market. It might not be worth it. So that's why I'm looking at that 180 day. I'm looking at that 30 day because I'm really digging into what the absorption rate is. That's going to tell me what's happening in the market. That's going to tell me what is actually the type of market we're in, a buyer's, a seller's, or an even market. This is the data that gets me into the conversation of whether or not it's worth it to start moving in this direction for farming, because this information here is going to be very pertinent for the clients that I'm going after. So once I put a marketing plan in place to actually do the activity of the farming, this is going to be, I'm either working against or with this information right now. Okay. All right. So the last side of it that I'm looking at when I'm looking at the sold data, I'm going to look at a second example of the sold data. It's our number 3, but a second sold data information. In this section of sold data, let's just call it 2. I'm really interested in the 365. I want to know what's happened in this area in the past 365 days, essentially a year. And here's why I'm looking at that. We set our goals yearly. And so if I were to affect change in the market area for a particular world that I want to farm, I need to know what are my capabilities of affecting that change, right? What can I actually do in this space? Who is already doing it? And what will my activities have to be? Like, what will be the heightened level of my activities to make sure that as I'm moving into this space to be able to create market share by farming, lead generation by farming, is it possible? Okay. So there's a couple things that I'm looking at. I want to look at the sold data. So I want to know how many homes have sold in the past year. In this particular area, 65. I want to know how many days on market. Okay, days on market. Right now in this area, it's 48. The other thing I'm curious about is expirations and terminated. The reason why I'm doing this is my margin of error for those things that are going to fall out. So if I took 12 listings, but if I look at the neighborhood as a whole, and in 365 years, 10% of them fall out, if I need to take 12, I actually need to take 13. If I need to take 20, then I actually need to take 22. So I need to make sure that what I need to take for that goal, for that to gain that market share, am I on point, right? We're drawing a little bit of a broad circle, but am I on point to get as close as I possibly can get to gain the market share? And so in this particular area, 13 have fallen out or expired. So 78 total listings came online, 65 sold, 13 went expired or terminated. Now, there is some crossover in this space, but that's not important because it really is so small. You may want to take a look at that in a more narrow space if you're really curious, especially during the times of COVID, or if there's another anomaly that's happening in the neighborhood. How much is going expired in the past 30 days? That would give you a good inclination of what the market in that particular area is going to be doing as well. Yet when I look at this over a long period of time, my goal is to really understand where my margin of error is to be able to hit the goal that I have. So if I'm looking at this information and I want to effectively change and bring a farm into my space, usually it's for lead generation, usually it's for a portion of my goal. So let's just say that I want to be able to hit 12 transactions from this particular farm to be able to increase my goal that I have for the year. Well, if I looked at this and I knew that 12 was my goal, 65 sold last year. So if the same thing happens and 65 hits us again, well, then I need to get about 18% of that market share. Immediately, you should be thinking, who already has 18% of the market share? And I go back and I look at the sold data, I sort it, I look and see who sold the most. And in reality, if I look at my particular neighborhood, nobody has this kind of capacity. Nobody has this control in my neighborhood. Most people have, there's two people who have about 6%. One person that has like 8 to 10%, usually that they have a team scenario going on. And then there's a couple other people who have onesies, twosies all the way down. So there isn't anybody who dominates this market. There are people who have market share, but nobody dominates this market in the way that having true market share, that retail 15%. So I'm aiming for that. Immediately, my thought process should be, I need to get 18%. I would then be the number 1, 2, and 3 spot technically at 18% because the top 3% or the top 3 people just barely hits about that 18% mark. Well, now I need to look at what are they doing in their business? How long have they been in this area? Am I fighting against somebody who is just holding on to what they've always had? Are they resting on their laurels? Are they doing something brand new? What are their efforts for marketing? So now my marketing plan has to be at least a +1 of the top 3 agents who have market share. Now that doesn't mean that I can't make something better, smarter, I can't be a little bit more intriguing. There's a lot that I can still do. And yet my efforts have to be in the range of the top 3 agents. If I'm not willing to do at a minimum of what they're doing or to do what they're doing better, then I will not gain market share. I will not hit my goal and I will be chasing a pipe dream. The reality is when I understand this information, these numbers help me understand what are my new activities to make sure that when I'm farming, I am farming for a purpose to get a return on the investment spent. And so if I'm looking at this, I need to get 12 out of 65 is 18%. I've got to get 18% of the market. I hope this is making sense. I hope this is turning into a little bit more of a spin cycle than what you were expecting, because most people really look at farming as, I'm just going to go out and start doing things. And then by the means of me doing things, it's going to happen. If I build it, they will come. It's true. If you build it, they will come. But if I'm working in an area where they sold 13 homes in a year and I want to gain 12, I want to get 99% of the market share. It's a little bit crazy, and that would be really drastic. That means I would have to have such a heightened focus in that one space. That is my time worth being spent in that one space versus somewhere else where there's a margin of error that's a bit higher, and so that I can have a true return on that investment that takes my time, my finite moment, my time. I can't have more or less time. I can spend the right amount of time in each lead generation space, reaping what I need to from that area to make sure that I am gaining my goals. I'm reaching my goals. I'm attaining that life that I have by design. Okay. So I'm looking at sold. The other thing is the days on market. Here's what's really interesting in the market. So what this is showing me is, where is my market share possible, right? Where is my market share possible? The 48 days on market. And this is what I mean by that. Where is it possible? Because it's not that you can't, it's what's possible. 48 days. If I want to take 12 listings and every 48 days a home sells, well, let's just take this into thought process. If I take a listing today, it won't sell for 48 days on average. So from today, 48 days away from this, let me just do this real quick. So today is, what is it? May 13, May 14. 48 days from today is June 29. Or it might be June 31. There might be some bad math in there. Okay. 48 days later, August 18th. 48 days later, November 20th. 48 days later, January 7th. 48 days later, February 24th. 48 days later, April 12th. And then 48 days later is going to be May 30th. So, by the average days on market, I needed to take 12 listings. By what the market was able to do, I was only able to get to 8 because the average days on market was 48 days. The point is, what's possible is still 12. What it means is that if I'm starting today, I need to then make up a difference of 4. That 4 needs to be front loaded. So I don't take one a month, right? I don't take one transaction a month. I've got to take 2 transactions in May, 2 transactions in June, so that I can make up that 4 that I needed, 2 transactions in August, right? So I've got to take 2 in those months, and I say that. It's May, June, July. May, June, July, August. I got 2, 2, 2, 2. So then for the remaining 8 months, I take the 4, and now I've got enough in my pipeline to make sure that I'm attaining my goal. So the average days on market is showing me what is possible. And I hope that math made sense, right? Because I did kind of detour a hair with this side of things. 48 days later, this is what the process is. In 48 days, that means in 1 year, if I took 1 listing a month, I'm only actually selling 8 listings. To be able to get to 12, I've got to front load my starting point. So my starting point looks like a curve that goes like this so that it can even out. Because eventually it's going to even out, and I take my 1 listing a month. I've given it enough time, and now I have 1 listing that closes every single month because of my activities. My actions are producing the results. I've got to front load, though, to make sure that I have the ability to hit my goal in 1 year if the average days on market is 48. Which obviously, if you look at that, and I really want to understand the days on market, if this days on market is in the 100, 150 range for that particular area that I want to farm, I will need to front load my business double. So if this days on market was in the 98, 99 range, I now have to take 5 or 6 from the day that I started. I need to be shooting for 5 or 6 listings that I take in the first 2 to 3 months, 2 to 3, 2 to 4 months. I have to take 5 to 6 listings. Do I have the ability to take 5 to 6 listings? It's possible. It just shows me what amount of work I'm going to have to put into gaining market share of a particular farm to hit a goal that I have set. I hope this makes sense. I know that I'm chasing a couple of rabbits in this conversation, and yet it does take more than just looking at, I want to take over this neighborhood. I'm just going to be loud and obnoxious, and I'm going to do it because people know me. I'm going to make a concerted effort of, is the time that I'm doing this, is it worth the effort that I'm putting into it? Is there a return on this investment? I can look at the potential return on that investment by doing these numbers from the very start. In the very beginning, I can look at all of this information. And so if I look at this, right, in this expired number, it's actually going to say, I need to take 12 to hit my goal. I need to hit 13 because of the expired. And if I look at it, I need to front load the 13 in the first half of the year. So if I need to take 13, the second half I'm going to get 6, 7, that's not going to cut it. I need to make sure this 7 is closer to about a 10, so that then as it levels out, by the time all is said and done and a year rolls around, I've put in the effort to be able to create the consistency that has the 1 to 2 listings that I have to take every single month in accordance to the 48 days on market, so that then I can get the 12 listings that closes, gains my market share. Now think about that. If I gain this market share, I now have 18% of the market. There's almost this tipping point to when you get beyond that 15 that most people will assume that you control the neighborhood. Everybody will say, oh, well, you need to use X, Y, and Z because like I see their name everywhere. Well, it's true. You see my name everywhere because my open house signs are everywhere, because I have 2 to 3 active listings every single week. Every single week, because I'm consistently selling homes and bringing houses onto the market. So now I have houses with signs in front of them. I have open house signs everywhere. I've done the efforts that I have to do to make sure that I am farming, the activity of farming in the neighborhood. When you hit this goal, you're going to see that it's going to be real easy to year over year hit your 12, as long as you remain consistent in your farm, as long as you're still checking back to this data. This data is really important to know all the time. You can set up little searches in your MLS that it's like instantaneous searches. I want to see what's happening, spit it out, and let me know what's going on. When I look at this, really what's happening, like this sold is understanding my market share. The days on market that's really my gap, right? When I say what is possible, it's about a gap. I can get to 12, but I need to get to 12 by front loading based off of the days on market. The expiration is going to help me understand the fallout so that my goal is actually on point. So I need to get 13, but I need to take the majority of my listings needs to be on the front end, so that as I taper into that days on market, I'm in a consistent mode of closing every single month, at least 1 to 2 transactions, because I've done enough of the effort to get there. I hope this makes sense. So when I look at and I say that we're going to talk about farming at a high level, this is my brain before I ever start to put action into any neighborhood. What does this mean? And now what's really fun about this, when you know this information, walk into any listing presentation and tell me you don't win over almost every single other agent who will walk into that door, because you understand what it means to be an economic leader in an area. How fun would it be to be a party trick, right? You're at a party in a neighborhood and your neighborhood's like, oh my gosh, it's everything and blah, 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 and Judy and this, that, and the other. And they say, Randy, what's your opinion? You're like, man, well, if you look at it, because I know that the data of it is blah, 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 blah. And so if you really want to capitalize on selling your home and getting the best dollar, here are the things that you are going to have to do. Here are the things that your agent's going to have to do. Here's what the data is telling us to be able to be at an economic standpoint. Like, here's all the information. It makes you a real estate expert, an advocate, a real true fiduciary in the process. And I hope this makes sense. And if you do have any questions, guys, I really want you to post those comments, right? Post the comments. I will always check back into my videos and pay attention to the questions and the curiosities that are brought. Now, here's the other thing that I want to show you. All of this is then relative. When I have this information, it's all relative. So if I look at a particular neighborhood and I know that I've got to take 5 to 6 listings in the first 3 months and then 2 listings every month after that, the 2 listings is easy. in my brain. The 5 or 6 is going to be difficult. So I create a plan for all of that. Really, it's can the ramp up be worth the execution versus another area if I look at it and I really only need to take one listing every month. And that one listing every month that I take, I actually only need to ramp up another listing in the first 2 months. And so I take, because of the days on market, those first 2 listings. That's a much easier space. My return on investment on which market I choose to farm is really very relevant to my goals. So you have to have great goal setting. And then you need to know, how can I measure this? How can I weigh which farm do I really want to put my effort into farming? Part of that has to do with the who already has market share, and the other part has to do with this little grid. This is easy to hard. This is fast to slow. If I look at all the data and I understand what the efforts are going to be able to gain market share, and it's going to be easy to do, and I can implement things fast, I want to live in that box. If it's going to be easy to do, but it might take a little bit longer, I'm going to be a little bit curious. We'll put a little smirk. I'm going to be curious about that one. We'll draw a little question mark. If it's going to be really easy and really hard to be able to execute, it's going to be a little bit more of it's going to be harder for me to weigh. It's going to be really slow and really hard. That's an easy no. And so obviously, if I were weighing these, it's going to be real simple to look at the markets that I want to farm, the neighborhoods that I want to farm, slap the processes into this. So now I have the data. I take that data, and then I think about where all the activities then are going to have to be to affect change. The bare minimum activities is looking at who already has market share and what are they doing to gain that market share. So I look at the activities that I would have to do to gain market share in that area, and I start plotting it on this map. And I see 2 neighborhoods that are in this little frowny face, and one of my neighborhoods is in a happy face, and one of my neighborhoods is in the maybe face. I'm always going to go for easy and fast. This 100% is the neighborhood that I choose to market first, that I choose to farm first. I then am going to move into this space because it's still easy. It may take a little bit longer, but my effort for my time that I put on task is going to be a lot easier, and it might even be really simple to leverage. I'm going to move into this one next, and then obviously this box lasts 1, 2, 3, and this box never if you can. When I look at farming, now I know what I can do to put action to make sure that I can procure the result that I'm desiring. You see, when we look at farming and we just want to put effort into doing things, the things that I do should be pointing at a number. It should be on a path. I speak on mission, vision, values a lot. It should be lining up with the vision that I have for my company. It should be lining up with the mission that I have to move forward. And the way we do that is to measure it really well in the beginning. And then the activities could be incredibly simple. We look at it and we think we've got to do all these big events. Well, the reality is that the top producers don't do any big events. And the top producers only do these things. And so if I really did that one thing at a plus level, there's a great chance that I'm going to take 1 or 2 listings from each one of those people in the top 3. Well, if I take 1 to 2 listings from them, right? If I win 1 to 2 listings that they don't get, well, I'm already 6 listings into the process. And then I put the rest of my efforts into gaining market share by lead generation. Like, there is a more concerted effort that I can put into practice if I know what I'm aiming for. If I'm just throwing enough spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, we're playing the lottery with our business. I would much rather invest in my business and see it compound by investing in the right places, doing the right activities that are leading towards the data, right? That are leading towards what is possible based off of the data. Nothing is actually impossible. If you had enough time, you could do anything. It's just a matter of how much time and effort we need to put into it. Weigh it by this, understand the data, and then create your action plan out of that. So I hope this makes sense. Again, I know this is a lot. I know that I have a lot of conversations around this sort of thing. This is how my brain acts. And I just want to get you a peek into it so that when you are building your farming plan, that you can do it with such tenacity that you gain the market share and you can become a true advocate in those spaces. I don't want you to just be all willy-nilly about your business. Be purposeful about your business. It will make you have meaning behind every single thing that you do. Hope this helps you out. If you do have questions or comments, guys, please leave them below. Please subscribe if this helps you. I do this kind of stuff all the time. Please hit the subscribe button and you'll see all of my videos pop up whenever I do present them. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. You're absolutely fabulous. Go have an amazing day.